Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Stand Alone, where we find the best of the best and we really dissect, what it means to stand alone. And what we're talking about is going from ordinary to extraordinary. And today I have a very special guest with us. This is someone who's near and dear to me. I always think about when everyone is just minding their own business and you see someone pull up in a Ferrari beside you, and we all just have this question, what did you do to get that? And that's like what's inside every child's heart. We just want to know, what do I have to do? And when we go through Roger's book today, The Most Unlikely Leader, what's incredible is when you dissect it, it's some of the things that many of us would fold, but he didn't. He persisted. And today we're talking about just learning about being wise in business, not just going through things, but learning from them. And so, Roger, I really wanted to dissect leadership with you today. And I wanted to kick off how you kicked off in your book, because a lot of us today, after COVID, we're going through maybe what could be a rock bottom. And your book demonstrates how you really use those as platforms to push yourself against it and challenge yourself to come back stronger every single time. I want to ask you, what was it inside of you when you had these rock bottoms that made you decide to keep going? Because as I read your book, this is what saved you. You just kept going. So what was it inside of you that said, I don't have an option. I have to keep going?
Yeah, Sabrina, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. Really appreciate it. You are a groundbreaker, and you continue to do that. So it's a real privilege to be with you here. It's interesting because I don't know if I could put one word on it. First of all, I wish that I had hit bottom a lot sooner. I wish it hadn't taken me these years of addiction and all the stuff that it took me to go through to really, really hit bottom and then move forward. So part of it was just surviving, right? Part of it was just, I want to survive, and if I'm going to survive, I can't get stuck in where I am. But I think the other part was I realized early on that if it was easy, everybody would have it. And so once I understood that premise and understood, okay, Roger, listen, nothing is going to be easy for you. It's not like, I was a natural born salesperson or a natural born leader or a natural born CEO. It was all learned behavior. In fact, I tell the story often about, as a salesperson, you kind of learn, or I learned at that time, use an assumptive close, use your closing line and then shut up, right? And that's kind of like the rule. And whoever speaks first, well, they're going to be the buyer. So, but I would get to that closing line, Sabrina, and literally the back of my neck would start to shake. And I really thought that people thought that I was having some type of seizure. It was that bad. And so I realized early on, okay, if I want to have success, then there is no magic bullet for me, and there may be for other people, but I'm just saying for me, there wasn't. What I was going to have to do is work harder than anybody else. When other people were giving 6 presentations in a day, I was going to have to give 8 to 10 presentations in a day. When other people were, doing whatever, I was practicing my present. I was doing all those things that really nobody else wanted to do. And that I knew that if I did do it, then I would start to get some results, some good results. And if I got good results, then I would start to get confident. And if I got confidence, then I had a really good chance of succeeding. And interesting enough, that first year I was agent of the year. So, I hear people go, well, I'm not really meant for that. It's not like me, well, so what? Get over it. If you want it, you're just going to have to do things and form the habits that, we all hear of that successful people form. And in this case, it was the same thing as a leader, and it was the same thing as a CEO.
Yeah. And I think this is what's really important for people to understand. We're talking about a timeline, which involves time. And a lot of people, we want something, we want it right away. If we don't get it, we develop a bad attitude. And that bad attitude actually prevents us from getting and landing in better places. As I went through your timeline, I had to write down the year and where you were. And I ran out of room on my paper to track you. And so if you guys
that just shows how old I am, Sabrina.
It shows a lot more. What I do want to share with everyone, if you could imagine someone going through really hard and difficult times as a young person, struggling in their parent relationships, and then finding themselves in a career where they're not sure if this is what they want to do, but then becoming a CEO of that same company that he would find himself into, and not just a CEO of one company, but a CEO of 3 different insurance companies at the same time. And why I want to dissect this with everyone is because, Roger, I once heard this from one of the first female Apache helicopter pilots. And she had said that when you want to take off in the air, a lot of people think that you have to go with the wind, but she says you actually have to point in the direction against the wind to get the lift to take you up. And I think today, like, really getting into the details of your story, it's very foundational, because that difficulty that you endured, it somehow projected you to go to higher levels than most people would. What could you speak on in terms of whatever difficulty people find themselves in, to use that to serve you, as opposed to you doing what is natural, which is developing a victim mentality, and then, going and finding things with ease, as opposed to facing the wind and then lifting you up to agent to CEO?
Yeah, it's almost like I wish that people couldn't see the end result. I wish that they could only see the grind that it takes to get to the end result, so that they wouldn't have these expectations that this was just, an easy thing to do. I think that I was always pretty competitive. And so, I kind of think, okay, well, what do successful people have in common? They are competitive, they persevere, they keep on moving forward. And I think that, if you look at what happened with me, so at 15 years old, right, I'm homeless, I'm a drug addict and a high school dropout, and never went back, and the only thing I got was my GED, so never furthered my education after that. When you think about that, you think, well, listen, prospects for this guy's future does not look very good, and it didn't look very good. Throw onto that 20 years of being a functioning addict, where really, from the eyes of other people, what they saw is a very successful person, right? Number 1 salesperson, number 1 SGA, all of this. But really what it was somebody who was continuously self-destructing. It's very hard to keep that level of success and maintain an addiction, because an addiction is a lot of negative energy, and you spend a lot of negative energy feeding your addiction in whichever way, shape or form that you can. So it's kind of like, okay, I got all these things going against me. On the other hand, I've always had this philosophy that that it was a kind of like a burn your bridges philosophy. And I know you're kind of aware of this, but it's like where most people are saying, don't ever burn your bridges. And yeah, my philosophy is burn every damn one of them. And I don't, I mean, if you want to burn a relationship, that's fine. I don't mean it that way. But what I do mean is that people go through this world with a plan B in their mind. If this doesn't work, I'll do this. And they hit this wall, and they hit this, what seems like an insurmountable obstacle, and they give up on their dreams so easy because they take that escape hatch. But if they burn that bridge behind them, if the only way that they can move is forward, then it is amazing about human nature and how creative we get to overcome an obstacle when it is our only path. And somehow we get over it, we go around it, we get through it, but we get over that obstacle. And years later, you look back and you go, all right, well, that was a bump in the road. But right then it's, this huge, huge wall that doesn't seem like you're going to be able to get through it. But you will get through it if you just keep moving forward, keep moving forward, keep moving forward. Even when, Mark McAndrew, who was, one of my great mentors, right? So one day he says, Roger, nothing's as good as it seems and nothing's as bad as it seems. And I remember looking at him and going, oh, man, I wish I'd known that like 30 years ago, because my highs were so high and my lows were so low. Mm-hmm. And if I just understood that, hey, when I'm on that mountain, okay, something's going to happen. I'm going to get knocked off of it. It's just the way of the world. And you know what? When I'm in one of those valleys, this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. And once I accepted that, then I went, oh man, this makes life a lot easier to deal with, and you get to deal with it on your terms.
Yeah. And in your book, you talk about like the other advice he gave you, where is just respond, don't react. And I think that ties in nicely to that also, where people are in these emotional roller coasters right now. And what's happening is a lot of reaction. I wanted to address, it was your stepfather, I believe, that introduced you to this opportunity. And it's always like we get this little bit of God's grace that enters our life in a moment in time. And I believe the difference with people is that you do it for something more than just yourself, because you said something in there where you didn't want to embarrass him and let him down, because it was like your gateway to get ahead. What could you speak about that for people that get an opportunity? Sometimes you don't even deserve it, but it's this window that you get. And a lot of people are so self-absorbed today, Roger, that they're like, well, if I don't feel like doing it, I'm not going to do it. But maybe we should think about, someone gave us an opportunity. Let's not let them down, because I've experienced that myself in my career. What could you speak about on that? Give people inspiration today, that it's not just about you.
I love that. I love that. And, Mr. Rappaport, one of the things that he taught was this thing of how you need to see more in people than they see in themselves. You need to have faith in a person's potential and what they can be. And when I look back at my life, there's no reason in my mind at that moment why those people should have seen what they saw in me. My stepfather, who, by the way, was the original member of the President's Club, the charter member of the President's Club, right? My stepfather, Mike Ferrone, Bernard Rappaport, Mark McAndrew, they saw things in me, potential in me, that I couldn't possibly see at that time in my life. And so, you just got to have some faith that there are people there that are wiser than you at that moment. And if they have the wisdom to see something in you that even you don't see yourself, have faith that they can see it and that something's there, and understand that they're putting that out, and they're really not asking anything in return. You know, what they want to see is a better you.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to rebel against a better you, it's not very logical. It doesn't make any sense, right? So, you know, kind of sit back from it and kind of understand, wow, this person is really stepping out there for me to be successful. And I'm going to do everything that I can not to disappoint them. And I'm going to do everything that I can to fulfill my potential that they're seeing in me.
Yeah, I think this is so powerful. And a lot of people are just into their feelings today. And it's a reminder that, you know, when someone is coaching you, when someone is spending and investing that time into you, it's because they see something that can be nurtured and manicured, you know, which leads me into just your evolution as a manager. I think this is very inspiring for a lot of people, because we often look at leaders and we think like, how did you know how to say this? Just like when Mark McAndrews is probably speaking to you, you're like, why didn't I think of that? Then we start to put them on a pedestal, but they too had some rough beginnings. You know, I loved what you said, like, because I completely relate to this. When I started being a manager, I would just yell a lot. I would scream a lot. And now when I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe I used to behave that way. And thank goodness people, you know, gave me that space to grow. So what would you say to like young leaders today, you know, speaking from a place of wisdom where you had elevated your place to like, you know, being in shareholder meetings and talking about, you know, financial reports, to this place of managing people and just trying to like drive them for performance? What could you speak to for a younger leader today that is frustrated, that thinks like, I do not have what it takes. This is annoying. I want nothing to do with this. What words of wisdom could you give to them?
Well, I think there's a couple of aha moments. Like, you know, when as a young leader, what happens is you get this moment where you go, and it's a frustrating moment. You go, damn it, I just can't do this by myself. And that should be a moment where you go, oh, that's right. I can't do it by myself. Because what new leaders do, they try to grab everything, right? And then and it's not going to be able to grab. You're going to have to delegate out and so on. You're going to have to have patience, right? What I never understood is why new leaders think that just because they tell the person they're training something once, twice, three times, that there's this expectation that they're going to get it. You know, it's like, well, I told you. Well, so what? You know, how many times did it take you to get it, or me to get it, or, you know, any of us? And so there's if you take that responsibility of being a new leader, then you know, you take that responsibility to be patient with the person. I also think that, and I've talked about this for years, I think that it is the responsibility of the leader to be the dragon slayer. You know, I think that it's important that that the leader helps the person that they're training, the person they're leading, overcome their fears. And so instead of telling somebody, hey, this is what you do, you know, literally getting out with them and showing them how to do it. For example, when I started, I was 22, 23 years old. And all of a sudden I'm trying to sell life insurance to 55-year-olds, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, why? They're not going to listen to me. What, you know, what the hell do I know about life insurance? I don't have anybody. I don't have any life insurance. You know, why would they listen to me? And therefore I was scared. And I was scared to close. I was definitely scared to come up with the rebuttals for the objections. And so when I got that, and when I understood that, my stepfather actually, you know, said, well, let's do this. Let's set appointments. And all we're going to do is go see people 55 and over. Right. And that's what we did. We went out in the field, we saw people 55, and it helped me overcome that fear. So I do think that as leaders that we need to be the dragon slayers in the people's lives that we're leading. I think that there are certain characteristics to being a leader. And if I could just touch on those real quick, Sabrina.
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay. So the first characteristic that I believe a leader should have is that they have to be visionary. And, you know, when I was a kid, I'd come back with report cards, and the report card would say, you know, Roger daydreams in class a lot. You know, today I would say to you, if you're not spending an hour of your day daydreaming, then you're not doing your job as a leader, because leaders can see further than the people that they're leading. And the way that they do that is by dreaming big and thinking the what ifs, you know, not just status quo, but what could happen if I made this change or did this or did that, you know, always constantly taking you out of the comfort zone. So I think that's number one. I think number two, and we touched on this a little bit, is that, you know, leaders have to have influence, right? So when I finished Maxwell's book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, I literally closed the book and said, damn, I have broken every one of these laws, right? It's just, what a failure in leadership. So, but I understood two things. I understood that if I wanted people to follow me, that I was going to have to get results, right? I mean, why would you follow me if I can't show you results? If I can't teach you how to sell, then why do you want to follow me? Because in the beginning, that's why I'm there, for you to teach me how to sell, right? So I've got to be able to get results, number one. But number two is that I really have to make sure that the person that I'm leading understands that I really, really care about them. And I know that sounds cliche. And I don't mean I care about them because of how it makes me look. I'm saying I care about them because I've taken that responsibility of being a leader seriously, and I am seriously concerned about their success and them having success and bringing home that success into their family and changing lives. That's just so important. So if I could show you results and I could show you I really, really care about you, then I have a really good chance that you're going to follow me in my vision. I got to have really strong systems. I've got to have systems that the organization doesn't implode because all of a sudden I'm gone for 3 weeks, that the systems are strong enough to keep everything in play. And then the last part of that is that don't have a system that you're not willing to inspect. So there's lots of systems out there, and there's a whole lot of non-inspection going on out there. And then all of a sudden things are failing and the person doesn't understand why. And it's because they didn't inspect the things that they had set up. And for some reason they get afraid, like, you know, it's like somebody coming back to them and saying, what, you don't trust me? And in reality, it's the furthest from that. It has nothing to do with trust whatsoever. It has to do with, I've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort to put in a system that I know is going to work. And if I really want it to work, then I'm going to inspect it to make sure that you're doing the things that is going to make it so that you have success, right? Once again, goes back to influence. So I think that if you could have those 4 things all working within your leadership style, then you got a really good chance of people following you, and you have a really good chance of being successful.
Right. You know, I think as we think about being a leader and also being a person that's pushing yourself to an extraordinary level, you can't stop working on yourself. And one of the tests of leadership, and I want to ask you this, is, you know, is the level of people that you can lead. That's like the ultimate test of, you know, pushing yourself as a leader of leaders. And so I think in your book, you know, you talk about this, but I've seen you do it firsthand. And when I started in leadership, I did not want to talk. I just wanted to listen and absorb, because I was around so many strong leaders that I just felt so insignificant. And watching you lead some very strong personalities was something that I would always take in. Could you give us some, you know, insights on how did you then go from being a person who had to learn how to just be a producer, then get into leadership and be like, wait, this is just frustrating, but then to become a leader of leaders? Like, what did you do to set yourself apart, and then to really not get intimidated, but really learn and hone in on that skill so that you could then grow a great business? What did you do to develop that?
Yeah. I used to talk about, especially in sales, just beginning, where I would talk about your belief system, right? That you got to believe in your product, you got to believe in yourself, you got to believe in your leadership, you got to believe in your company, you know, and if you don't do that, then you start to get cracks in your foundation and things start to falter. So, you know, if you didn't, if there was something about your product that you didn't understand, or somebody said something in a presentation, you know, that it was on your shoulders to go back and talk to your managers and understand why this product is better, or if there's something that the company did, you know, that you just didn't quite understand, that it was important that you go to your leadership and get the backup. In my case, and I've believed that for so long, that I kind of took that same philosophy and brought it up to when I was leading, and I mean really, really great people. So when you start off with that belief in yourself, you know, listen, I sure as heck didn't get everything right, but I sure as heck got more things right than I got wrong, you know? So there's two things. One is that I was pretty sure that if I made a decision, that it was going to be the right decision. And I had a real belief that that decision was going to be the right decision, that I had studied the data, that I had looked at all the different circumstances, that I had tested, and that in this case, that my decision was the right decision. Because when you have other powerful leaders around you and they don't agree with what you're saying, it's so easy for you to get knocked off of what you're doing, because all of a sudden you start self-doubt. And when you start self-doubt, that's the worst. So, you know, you really, really, really just have to really believe in the path you're going. On the other hand, let's say you made a wrong decision. Okay, well, you know what? You're not married to it. If you made a wrong decision, make a new decision. That's all. If you made a wrong decision, make a new one. Don't let people hold you and say, but you said this. I said this because of this data. I made this decision because of this data. I now have new data, and I don't have to go down with the Titanic. In fact, I can lead this Titanic around the iceberg now that I have this new data, and I'm going to make a new decision. So, you know, it's kind of, it's both of those things that are working at the same time. A belief in yourself that the decisions that you're making are the right decisions. Getting enough input is important from the leaders. But in the end, if you absolutely know your decision is right, then no matter what anybody is saying, you got to move forward. It's exactly what you did, Sabrina, right? I mean, all of a sudden, Sabrina was going to do this, and she was going to work in small businesses and this. And well, wait, that's not the way American Income. I mean, I can imagine how many naysayers there were, you know, talking in your head. So you just have to have that vision, that goal, that what you believe so strong that nobody's going to waver. And then, like I said, be flexible enough that if by chance it was the wrong decision, that you make a new decision or it evolves.
Yeah. I wanted to really go into this with you just for our audience, because I think it's an important time in human history where a lot of women are just, we're really getting to the top more than we ever have before. And a lot of people always ask me, like, what's the secret? What is the key? And there's just so many things, but a lot of it has to do with learning from strong people. Because at times there was no woman that I could attach to and say, like, okay, that's what I want to be. I had to like take that out of it. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because men think differently in business. And I often share this with women because they can get offended. But what I had to do was always ask myself, what would a man do in my position? And I would weigh what my natural thought is versus what would Roger Smith do in this position. And then I would look at it from an awareness point of view, instead of being overly emotional or getting to this place where I was just doubting myself because I had a certain feeling. And so I love that you said this, but I wanted to go into mentorship with this because.
Yeah, but let me just back up 1 second.
Yes.
And that goes back to that belief system, which is you really have to, as a woman, it's so important that you are going to with your beliefs. It's so easy to get labeled in so many different ways as a woman in business. You know, it's like, okay, shit, if I do this, you know, then I'm called this. If I do this, then I'm called that. If I do, you know, it's like, which way do I turn? And the answer is you better just go in the direction that you know is right for you, regardless of what perception, because these people are going to perceive that no matter what you do. It's not like, you know what I'm saying? So I just, going back to that belief, to me, for a woman, I think it's so important that you just, you know, just don't learn, but then don't, when it's time to take action, don't be overly concerned about feelings, thoughts, and what people perceive and so on.
Yeah, that was actually my mantra. It was quiet the noise. Like, I didn't let the noise of what was around me to ever influence something. If it was a value or a principle of mine, I kept to that value and principle. And if I was wrong, I was wrong. And I am able to sit there and say, like, okay, scratch that. But if it's a value or a principle, it won't underserve you. It will actually, you'll come out winning in the end. And I share this, like, never sell out on your values and principles to make an outside person right. You still end up losing when that happens.
You will lose no matter what.
100%.
Lose.
So, I love that. You know, when we talk about mentorship, I think it's really important today for, you know, and I talk about this, even though I know that you need to earn like the ability to get where you are. It should never be about gender. It should never be about color, any of those things. But as a male in a higher position, you know, what are your thoughts when you're seeing women and they are pushing the boundaries? Like, what made you be in support of that and not be a man that's like, whoa, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I'm backing off of this one. What made you, was it like because you had a mom? I just wanted to ask you this because I know, Roger, I never take for granted that I wouldn't be where I am if people didn't believe in me. You know, maybe I would have eventually got there, but it would have taken me longer. Why, you know, so just having people be fans of you does matter. What made you be that way versus be like, nope, want nothing to do with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, you know, my mom was, you know, she was a salesperson from the get. I mean, she was selling computer dating, you know, almost before there were computers or, you know, pregnant women's urine for a diet or something. I mean, she was always on
Wow,
the
this
edge.
was an innovator.
She was always on the edge, but she was really one of the great salespeople. I think that I think Bernard, with his thoughts, his perception of opportunity unlimited, that it didn't matter in gender or color or religion or any of that creed. It's that I took that to heart. That was a biggie for me, because remember of where I was coming from. So and often in the very beginning not feeling like I deserved an opportunity. So once I was in a position of leadership, then it was kind of like, everybody deserves that opportunity, no matter what, where they come from or what their background is or anything. When I was in Chicago, interesting enough, my number one GA and MGA at that time was Susan Gilbert, who, eventually did PR. Rona Spano, another one that was the top GA and the top MGA. I always had an empathy, to me, I was always amazed by the courage that a woman had to show in what was mostly a predominant men's world, and when you see these women that have that courage, then once again, as a leader, it's your responsibility to help them move up that ladder, not to put a ceiling on it. I listen, that concept, Sabrina, is so foreign to me. It is so foreign of why. And the only thing that it comes down to in my mind is that men who are trying to do that are threatened. They're just threatened in their own position. And screw them. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. Or they never had like a woman that they were raised with that had that role or position in their life. So it's so foreign to them that they can't even understand it. You know what I mean? Like they really think like, this makes no sense to me. And so like, they are not open to the idea that it's possible. I think that happens a lot.
Okay, so maybe if the mother, the wife was domestic and it just wasn't. I get that, and maybe that lasts till you're 25 or 30 years old. But
right.
Like you better get out of it.
Especially today. But thinking about your mentors, I know that you talk about in your book, like when your mentor lets you down.
Yeah.
And I know this happens in business a lot. It's happened to me too, where, you do put people on a pedestal and then they let you down. If you could speak on that, because I think for a lot of people, you have to be careful about lifting up a person too high, because, you'll elaborate on this, but unfortunately, how did that affect you? And then how did you rewire that relationship so it could still serve you and not kind of destroy all the things that you've built together?
Yeah. That was probably one of the toughest things that I went through. Because in my case, Mr. Rappaport was everything to me. He was everything, I mean, even though my stepfather had given me the opportunity, once my stepfather and I, we split in business, we weren't talking, there was a real family situation going on, but Bernard stepped in, and so, he was my true mentor at that time. And I had him on such a pedestal. Like this man could do no wrong. And it just so happens that I ended up, he had promised me that I could take over a certain territory. I was already running Arkansas, and I wanted to take over Dallas, and he promised me that if I came down there and I took this partner for 90 days, if I brought it up to quota, then he would get rid of the partner, right? And I'm gung ho. I can do that. I've done it in several states. I know how to build and build quick. And I did it. And what I didn't realize is that there was a real core relationship between this partner and Mr. Rappaport's son. So now he was in a real, political thing within his own family. But for me, it was like this, whatever this man had told me, it was gospel. And now, 90 days later, 120 days later, 160 days later, when I did what he asked me to do, he wouldn't do it. And I wasn't mature enough to deal with it. It created such a bad taste in my mouth. I gave up the territory. At that point I went into Baltimore, and literally I couldn't get rid of it. I couldn't get rid of it until I ended up leaving the company for a year or two. And it was in that time, and there was a lot of stuff at that time. I'd gotten into rehab, I'd gotten clean. So there's a lot of stuff where you kind of, you learn a whole new you. And it was during that time that as I learned a whole new me and thought about all the crap that I had done to other people, or lies or things that I personally had done, that, I wasn't holding Mr. Rapper. I was holding Mr. Rapper to a completely different set of standards. And in reality, they're not the same. It's like I said, if you make a wrong decision, make a new one. You have new facts, new data or something. And in this case, in my mind, I realized that it was my mistake, not his mistake, because he's human. You're human. I'm human, right? We're going to disappoint. It is going to happen. We try not to. We do our very best not to, but it is going to happen. And quite candidly, I didn't have the grace in me. I just did not have the grace to say, hey, I get you. I get you. It was a hard thing. You had family involved. I just didn't have the grace in me. And it took me leaving the company and me coming back in order to have that grace, and then, and then from there we had a great relationship. A couple stutter steps, but a great relationship.
Yeah, I think that word that you brought into this is just maturity, right? Because it takes wisdom for you to say that now. But at that time, there's probably no one that could have convinced you that you were wrong for feeling that way, because that's the mark of immaturity, when you're so closed-minded and you're thinking only this one way. One of the things that I trained myself to do was just ask this question, like, what is it that I do not know? If someone makes a misstep, or if something doesn't go my way, there's something I don't know. And then I become a good investigator and I go find out what that thing is. and selling helps you to be a good investigator, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's so powerful that you said that, because for a lot of people today, we're just reacting, and it's coming from a place of immaturity. And if you can just pause and see a bigger picture than the moment that you're in, you'll just make better decisions, which I love that you talk about. This really, the whole book is about this, where you really, Roger, started to lead your own life, which is really what we're all called to do, so that we can become a leader for other people to be inspired by, instead of us, reading a book. There's a great Japanese proverb. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but it made me think of your book. And it says, knowledge without wisdom is a load of books on the back of an ass, and that's what a lot of people,
I love that.
That's what a lot of people are doing. Like, we're in our 20s, and I've done this. I've
Yeah.
completely done this. We're in our 20s. We read John Maxwell and we're like, I'm a leader. I'm going to teach you this, but we haven't lived through it and we haven't fallen on our face yet. And so I think your book is so great because it allows us to see, and it gives us hope. You know, it gives everyone hope to know that no matter what you're going through, I think your overall message is just keep going.
Yeah.
And in that moment where you did step out, you know, you talk about that. A lot of people would have so much shame to come back in. You put your ego away in that moment, or maybe you didn't. I don't know. I was going to ask you, what was it about you in that moment that said, like, I don't care if I have an opportunity to come back in, I'm going to like apologize, do what I need to do. I don't know. Like, what was it that made you go in that direction versus like keeping it real and then it just gets more wrong?
Well, in that particular case, I had a good catalyst. So remember that I had left the company, I'd started with another company, and then about a year and a half into that, I then went into rehab. And so that was a changing moment in my life because it was about me reevaluating who I am and who I was and changing all these habits that I had had for years and years in my addiction. So it was basically changing my habits, changing who I am, how I thought about things. Bernard, God bless him, you know, reached out to me while I was in rehab, you know, and said, hey, would you think about coming back? And, you know, we didn't leave on good terms. It was pretty negative terms. And he reached out to me. And I remember he said, I got out and we're talking on the phone. He said, listen, Roger, I have like 7 states open. You know, I have Illinois, I have Missouri, I have Massachusetts. He's naming all the states. And I said to him, I said, B, I can't lead anybody right now. Tell you the truth, I just have to figure out how to lead myself. I don't know who I am, and I'm going to have a hard time trying to lead other people if I don't know who I am myself. And so I actually went to David Cohen's agency and went there as a personal producer for about 6 months. And you know, and it really, for me, it wasn't about putting my ego aside. I think once again, it was about right back to that survival. Okay, this is how I survived in that world, and that was not sustainable. Now I have to learn how to survive in this world, and so I got to learn who am I? Why do I do this? What, you know, correct every habit. I told the story in the addiction process where once I got sober, if I brushed my teeth with my left hand, I was going to brush my teeth with my right hand. I mean, every single habit that I felt I had led to 20 years of being a functioning addict. So, damn, I don't ever want to go back there again. Don't want to do that. Better learn, you know, completely different habits. So that's how that kind of that transpired. And as it turned out, it turned out the right decisions. And, you know, I was fortunate enough that Bernard did have the wisdom to reach out and say, hey, you know, this guy has a lot of talent and, you know, now he's clean and it's a different story. It's, you know, Bernard was the best at second chances, third chances, because he believed in you, you know, and he understood, listen, we're going to screw up. And I think that, you know, I also subscribe to that philosophy. I also subscribe to that, you know, that we are a company of second chances and third chances, and you know, we're not perfect and we're going to make mistakes, but if we see something in that person, then it's our responsibility to point out where the mistake is, and hopefully they can see that. Sometimes they can't see it. And maybe it's 2 years later, 3 years later that they evolve and they go, oh, wow, now I see it, you know?
Yeah. What would you say are, a situation where you have to back off instead of giving another chance? You say,
There's a line.
Yeah.
There's a line. There's a
What
line.
is that line?
My line was, if you make me get legal involved, I'm off.
Okay.
Because at that point, especially, in a publicly held company, once you got legal involved, then you really had to take your hands off. They just got involved, and you just had, you could put your input into it, but there were more people involved in the decision-making process once
Right.
that legal was involved. And I remember, a couple of people, sitting there and they're threatening, and I'm saying, listen, please, I'm telling you, you do not want to step over. For your sake, I'm asking you.
I have a line.
Don't step over this line.
And I'm even telling you what that line is.
Yeah. But Sabrina, I think that it's important as a leader that we express to people what our boundaries are.
Yes. Absolutely.
Because otherwise, if they don't know what your boundary is and you're not sure of your boundary,
yeah,
then unfortunate things are going to happen. So I think once again, it's up to the leader to say, hey, this is the line. If you decide to cross it, that's your decision, but this is the line.
That's great advice. Just to come full circle, I love that you finished the end of your book touching on faith and God. And, what I did see throughout your whole entire book was God's grace in your life. And that, sometimes when we're in these rough places, and I wanted you to speak on this because I know a lot of young people today are just very lost. We live in this world where our accessibility is so different because we see so many things from social media on our phone. It's like instant gratification. Yeah. And then it doesn't give us the space as a young person to then have the time to develop and go through problems. And then I find a lot of people are just, they're finding themselves in drugs. They're finding themselves like soothing with alcohol to numb their feelings. But if you could speak on, like, maybe if you had God in your life earlier, or we can't even really speak on this because I think everything works out perfectly. And God doesn't make mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. But what could you say to a young person, knowing like the role that faith plays in your life today, to knowing that there is something guiding you and trusting in something larger than just that moment that you're in right now, and then just repeating bad decisions, out of survival versus wanting to thrive and wanting to hit the next level of what you could be and what you were created to become? What could you share with people that are going through a hard time right now?
It is really one of the main reasons why I wrote the book, and to just kind of talk about how important faith is, and because for so many years, I didn't believe in God. I didn't know of God. I didn't, it just wasn't a part of anything with me. And even certain stages where I was like, beating my chest, like I did this, self-made millionaire bull, it's like when I was able to write this story out and look back at my life, it's so clear, it's so evident that there's no reason on earth why I should have gotten from where I was to where I became. There's just no reason. Every single thing where the odds are against you was in play, and over and over and over again, I was forgiven in my actions and my decisions and things that that normally should have just destroyed career, destroyed any chance of that, to think about that there was a moment in my life where I literally wanted to just started to walk into the ocean because I couldn't see a way out, because I couldn't see my way out of my addiction. And if that was going to rule my life for the rest of my life, then I didn't want that life at all. It's like the only thing I can see is that God was looking over, that God had a purpose for me that I didn't know. And I still believe that today. It's like, okay, what's my next chapter? And what is God's purpose for me? Because there's no reason why I should still be alive. There's no reason why. There was a group of us that hung out in a pool hall. That group, there is maybe one person, that 1 or 2 out of 10 that are still alive. And many of them were in jail, and then, that some died early, overdoses. And, I think there's one that's like in a rehab, like physical rehab center, but by the grace of God go on. Why wasn't I one of them? I don't know that answer, except to say, well, God had a purpose for me. And so all I can think of is, how do I keep performing and showing that purpose, even when I'm confused as I am today on what that purpose is in the next chapter. But it's so important. It's so important that you're not just sitting there thinking, oh, I did this all by myself. Wait, listen, what put these people in my life that could give me that wisdom, right? That didn't just happen by chance. There's a reason why people would tell me things that would stick with me for the rest of my life, that made me a better person, not just a better leader, but a better person. So, faith is really, really big to me. And it doesn't mean that I don't question things still. I do. I don't understand certain things, or the whys or wheres of religion in certain ways. But I understand that there's a purpose for me, and God has that purpose for me, and I'm going to keep on trying to do that purpose. And I hope that your listeners understand that, and if you just reflect a little bit on your life and where you are, and understand that where you can be, and just have a little faith. It's not only, what happens is when you have faith in God, you also then have faith in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it makes it all connects. At least it did for me. That's my story.
Yeah. And you're not young forever, which is like a strong message for people to hear, because short term, we're going to panic. We're going to think, just like you talked about, the high highs and the low lows. We think like, I'm never getting out of this, but many people do. And you will too. You just have to think short term, you're going to panic. Don't, because long term, it will all pan out. Roger, I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your life. I know that I wouldn't have the same journey that I had, and all the success I was able to experience. You're a major part of that. And I just want to thank you. So your life does matter, because it impacted mine in a positive way. And I just want to say thank you. I get to be an inspiration to a lot of different people around the world, but it's nice for people to start to see who has, helped me rise up to the levels that I've been able to achieve. And Roger, you are one of those people. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time today. And thank you for your wisdom. Everyone,
you're welcome.
This is a great book to get you to see the overall journey, and just keep on going. It will work out. Thank you so much, Roger.
Thank you, Sabrina. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.